Hello, everyone. This is Sasha with the LTRC. Thank you for joining us for Back to Basics for Lawyers Daily Law Practice Management with our sponsor, CosmoLex, as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series held every Wednesday. Our speaker today is Erica Bursler. Erica Bursler is the Vice President of Product Communications at CosmoLex Legal, developers of the only fully integrated case management, billing, and complete accounting system specifically designed for law offices. Erica's degree is in business administration, and she has nearly a decade of experience in the legal software industry, catering to the specialized technology needs of small to mid-sized law firms. Erica is passionate about helping legal professionals improve the way their law firms run, and she has given numerous presentations across North America on legal technologies such as law practice technology management, cloud computing, and legal billing and trust accounting compliance. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Great, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our session today. So as mentioned, we will be discussing really back to basics, kind of get to the foundational functionality and needs when it comes to daily law practice management. So the way that we'll break down today's session is first is what is law or legal practice management, also known as LPM, the day-to-day workflows. Now, workflow for every firm might be a little bit different. I'll be honest, when we talk about practice management, a lot of it just comes down to day-to-day business management. Like every business has to do a lot of the same activities other than the very specific legal or practice area specific type of functions. But there's a lot of similarities that carry over multiple businesses and also to your personal lives when it comes to just the day-to-day. And then lastly, we'll talk about how to streamline with technology. I think in the past year or so, there really has been a technology boom in many industries, but also the legal industry, where there's a lot of new exciting applications, especially with the more acceptance of cloud as years go on. There's more and more options available. And I think it's good to know that even though you're used to doing things a certain way, doesn't mean you can't do it more efficiently and possibly even more accurately by leveraging different types of tools. So let's first talk about legal practice management and just law firm activities as a whole. So this is a very top level image here. You can get really in the weeds when it comes to the day-to-day, but in general, most businesses, specifically law firms, you have your front office, which is everything that involves your customer base, which is your clients. So that could be meetings, whether it's in office, at court, externally, with other parties, just managing those appointments and calendars, your daily tasks. Now, for a law firm, that task list or what needs to get done could be everything from personal to just generalized business to specific to certain files to deadlines that have to be done, maybe for certain documentation or submissions. And then to the communication, how do you communicate with your clients? That's, phone reception, that's email communication, that's securely sharing certain type of data. All of those which don't have anything really to do with your financials as a firm, your day-to-day is considered that front office. The back office is more of what makes you money. The front office activities are actually the billable activities that make you money, but how do you actually receive that money in? That's billing for your clients, receiving payments on those, even following up with collection activities, the retainers that you hold for your clients, your overall business planning, goal setting, reporting, tax reporting. All of that is kind of that necessary, not so fun stuff of running a business, but it's essential to ensure that you're successful so that you know kind of where you stand and how to get where you want to be as a business. So I think it's important also to think of the type of technology that you may use for these different types of functions now. You might have no technology. You might have certain tools that only satisfy some of these needs. Do they work together? Do they not? Are they integrated? Are they legal specific? I think that's always an important thing to think of. And some of you may have insight into the whole global functionality of your firm, like maybe you're an office manager or someone or a managing partner that has a lot of visibility. but some of you may not. You might only be very specific in a certain function, and it's good to have those discussions to understand that full picture. So this is the kind of the breadth of legal practice management. So we're going to launch a poll right now, which is related to what tools does your firm use most for daily practice management activities? Like I said, take your best answer based on what you know how your firm operates. Do you use pen and paper mostly, generic tools? And again, this is what you use most, like Google, a practice management solution, or does each person kind of do their own thing? You don't have really a centralized setup. All right, so we do have close to half, about 44%, say generic tools like Outlook and Google. Also, many of you said practice management solution. Still a good amount that say pen and paper. Last is each person has their own setup. I'm happy about that. I would be happier if there was 0 for that number, but I'm happy that is the lowest option on the list. So what's good here, it means that many of you are utilizing technology. Some of you are not, but I'm hoping you're present in today's session to learn more about it and hopefully go in that direction. For those who are utilizing tools like Outlook and Google, I think that they are great applications for your day-to-day business, but we'll talk about all those other functions that we mentioned. How do you handle those in tools like Outlook and Google? All right, so let's get on into it. Daily practice management. We're going to talk a bit about the individualized workflows for different areas that I kind of showed on that initial screen. Think of how you do these things now. Do you handle all of these steps? Are they going well, not well? Are they cumbersome? And again, based on your role in the firm, you might have a different perspective, but this opens the door for conversation. So the first workflow we're going to talk about is matter management. Now, matter management is somewhat unique to law firms. I mean, every business kind of has a customer base or a client-based data record usually, but there's a lot of things specific to legal matter management that you need to keep in mind. So there's the client intake, which again, not unique to law firms because everybody needs to receive data, but you think of like if you were to go to a new doctor, for instance, they'll have a bunch of forms for you to fill out. You may need to give some personal information, and just capturing all of that and getting that into your system is the active intake. Can be a little bit cumbersome at the start of a file. You may or may not have an efficient process for that, but it is necessary for you to get that file set up. Sometimes that's even necessary for potential clients, people that you haven't even taken on yet, but maybe you did a free consultation or they reached out to you on your website and you still need to be able to capture that information. Then you have conflict checks. So let's say you do want to go ahead and work, or you're considering taking on this file, you want to make sure to run a conflict check, which is basically a database search to see, have I either worked with this person before or any related party conflict. Now, you may do a conflict check, come up with results and determine that it's not, doesn't classify as a conflict, that's fine, but this is requirement. Usually for most insurance, it is a requirement, and depending on the type of your work that you do, it could be pretty strict. So you want to make sure that you're running those conflict checks. File creation is actually setting up that file once you decide to start doing business for them. Usually that is notated as a matter. And then the organization of matter-related records. So once you start doing work on a file, you're going to have all different types of activities. And being able to capture that effectively is so important. Many of you mentioned, using an Outlook or a Google. Is it centralized? Can you look at John Smith's file and see everything that's been going on? It could be appointments, it could be notes, it could be to-do list items. Are you able to do that? So some technology or tips to keep in mind, first is automated intake. So I gave the example before about a doctor's office. Some of you, I personally might have had the experience of your doctor or your dentist or anybody like that sending you a link before you have your appointment to saying, to save us some time, click on this link, fill in this information, and that way you don't have to come 30 minutes early to get this paperwork done. Excellent feature both for efficiency, convenience, and accuracy, because you're getting literally the words that your client is typing is what ends up in your database, because it's the act of being able to send that link, but also for that information to populate into your practice management tool or whatever tool that you're using, a CRM, etc. So it's a great way to save time on that more tedious initial administrative work, but it is a great convenience to your client because it saves time. And they can do it whenever they need to. They don't have to do it in front of you. And it does really help with that accuracy. Default settings. It may seem like common knowledge, but I can't tell you how many people utilize their technology and they don't effectively set it up. So if you're using any of the tools or technology that you're using in your business, you should make sure that somebody, if not yourself, is looking from the administrative side of what settings are possible in the system, because default settings are my personal favorite, because it's not just choosing a setting, it's do you have scenarios where this response is always going to be the answer? Or like a timekeeper, for instance, myself, if I'm tracking time, let's say I only track time for myself. Wouldn't it be helpful for my default timekeeper to be set to me so I don't have to choose it from the list every single time? That's the idea behind default settings. So you first need to become familiar with the tools that you use and what they have available. Anywhere you can default where it makes sense, because if it's a field that changes all the time, a default won't make sense. If it does make sense, utilize it because it will save a lot of time and it will reduce mistakes as well. Form templates. Anything that you have related to your matter setup. It could be letters, it could be different documents that they need to finish, could be your retainer agreement. See if you can have a template. Templates are a great efficiency tool. Basically, just like when you think of an invoice template, or if you ever use tools like Hot Docs, essentially that's the idea. Find the form. Sometimes you can even download, retainer agreements that you can insert fields into. Now you'll need some sort of document assembly type of tool, which could be Hot Docs, or some practice management tools include that as well, where you can create your own, let's say, agreement, insert those fields, and then you can just merge it with your data. So that way it will go ahead and populate that information for you. Incredibly helpful for standardized language. Even if you have something that 75% is similar and 25% is different, you can use a template to get that 75% done that much quicker. So if not using document templates right now, and I'm not just talking about your legal documents, also, and by legal, I mean like your HUD-1 statement, for instance, that's a form. That's something that you're provided, tax forms, that's something that you're provided, but your own personal law firm documentation, there are ways to do that more efficiently. Auto numbering. This is actually something that is, again, pretty straightforward, but it helps you keep a really accurate record of all of your matters. Instead of numbering them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 manually, a lot of systems that have matter management built in allow auto numbering, and you can set up whatever formula works for you. Some firms like to say, 2021 dash client ID dash matter ID. That's fine. You could choose to do that. Now, know what your tool is capable of, but that may help you in terms of your filing and your ability to retrieve those matters easily. And that centralized matter record. I already mentioned that before. Being able to look at a certain file and just link all related data and not have 20 different tools where that data is kind of spread out around is really important. If your client calls and has a question, you want to be able to really easily retrieve that important information. Legal practice management, that's essentially the thought process behind practice management tools, it is that matter centralized environment. Calendaring. I don't have to teach you all what calendaring is because we've been doing this our whole lives. Scheduling appointments and meetings could be internal among your staff or different people at the firm. Could be external as well, like client appointments or appointments with third parties. You may have deadlines on your calendar. That's something that you'll have to decide what works best for you, to have a deadline as an event or like a date and time, or just a completion date, maybe a task. And also, this is often billable activity. If you're doing any type of hourly work, your calendar makes up majority of what you do, majority of your billable time. So you want to ensure that that is captured accurately so that you know to bill for it. Some points from the technology side is real-time Updates. That's referring to basically using a cloud-based calendaring system. I still know many, I shouldn't say many, but I still know some law firms that use calendar printouts or a manual calendar. The problem with that is, how does it come with you? Now, if you have a planner or something, sure. But if something happens at the office and your paralegal or legal assistant gets a call that the client can't make it today and they need to update something, that requires a phone call, that requires a note, as opposed to if you're using like a Google Calendar, an Office 365, a practice management calendar that you can access anywhere. You could see those changes right away. Maybe an appointment had to be changed, maybe it had to be canceled, maybe the location of an appointment changed. All of that in real time is incredibly helpful to ensuring that you're most productive with your time. Shared calendaring. Who needs to see those calendars? Again, if you have that planner or if you have your own personal iCal that doesn't sync with anything, nobody knows what's going on with you that day. Even if people don't schedule appointments for you, it's still important for people to know when you'll be in the office, when you might be available, if they need to schedule an internal meeting, when they can do that. So sharing usually across most of staff is important. Syncs and integrations. Calendar is one of those things that I could for sure say, and I'm sure you'll all agree, people don't easily change. You know, you become very comfortable with whether it's a Microsoft or Google World or even Apple, be very comfortable with what you're using. Same thing goes for email. Rarely do people leave those platforms. So look for tools that sync. Now, if you're using a popular platform like Google, it syncs with everything. So you're going to find those options. But I think it's important if you use them independently from, let's say, your billing software. Independently, you need to make sure that those billable items that are on your calendar actually get billed to your client. So look for, if you're going to integrate, look for integrations that allow you to bill your events or your emails or anything that might be in those tools into your billing software. That will help a lot to ensure that billable activity is captured. Definitely use in-write reminders. That's just a generalized tip. Even for tasks, which we'll talk about in a moment, reminders are critical. It's so easy for us to get overwhelmed with what's coming up today, tomorrow, next week. Have them on for everybody that needs to be in attendance. Provide public calendar links. So I've used tools like Calendly, for instance, which you can decide. Now it's not appropriate for every situation, but you can actually have just an open calendar link that you send to whether it be a client or maybe share internally, where somebody can click on that link and see your calendar availability. So if they don't have access, let's say in Google or Outlook to see your calendar, they can click on that link and see slots available and schedule it right there. It is such a tremendous help, especially if you need to coordinate with an outside party. You can use it for clients, of course, but I'm even referring to outside of clients. If I needed to talk to another professional and it's like, are you free on Thursday? Okay, what time? And it's back and forth volley of emails for a week, as opposed to just saying, here's my link, schedule a call. It helps that whole process and really does save time. And anything you possibly can link to a matter. Now, of course, you'd have to have that matter centralized record keeping, but if you do, everything that can be should be linked to its respective matter so that when you look at that matter, you can see that linked information. And this goes with the few of the things I talked about, the sync point and also the linking events to matters. Many people might not see the value of having your calendar and billing together. That is the value. All of that billable activity, you want to make sure it doesn't drop and that it actually gets billed. So streamline that as much as possible. Could be by integration, could be by using those functions in the same tool. All right, task management. So this is your daily to-dos, any projects that you might be working on with other staff. You want to ensure these items are not missed. Like I said, this could include deadlines, or it could just be, it could be loose deadlines, it could be strict deadlines, kind of depends. And honestly, now with a lot of remote or hybrid work, task management is one of the biggest things I think should be implemented in all businesses, if not already, because it allows you to really collaborate more effectively remotely and also to set expectations and accountability more clearly. I think we all rely way too much on being able to walk up to somebody's desk or call a meeting, which are actually very inefficient ways of doing check-ins. Using task management allows you to do all of that collaboratively in a very efficient manner, but still make sure everybody's on top of what they need to do. So for technology, I mentioned templates with documents, same goes for tasks. Anything that can be templatized in your setup, do it. Anything that's repetitive, try to find out if there's a way to do a template. If you do very similar type of work and you have the same tasks or activities that take place every time you do that type of matter, create a template. Some tools have checklist templates built in, or even if you have one on the side that you can copy paste into your system, it saves tons of time, but also make sure no items get missed. Always assign due dates. I think that this gets skipped over way too often, and it may seem common knowledge, but I think so often people will sign a task, no due date, because it doesn't actually have a due date. But guess what happens? When you have no due date, it falls to the bottom of the pile for whoever that person is. It will probably never get done. So even if it's an arbitrary date, like let's say you'd ideally like to have this back in a week, pick a random date or the end of next week and have that date assigned, because otherwise those items will likely not get done. Real-time progress, this comes down to cloud-based task management tools, being able to see, instead of having those meetings and check-ins all the time, can somebody say, I'm working on this task, I'm 50% done, or comment on it and say, hey, what's the progress on this task? And somebody can respond back to you. Not only is that more efficient, but it's connected to that specific item. So I'm not looking back saying, wait, what was that meeting about? Or what was that email about? That comment, that thread, that whatever communication is happening is linked to that specific task. Commenting, that's exactly the point that I just mentioned, multi-way. So you can say, for the progress update, or if you needed to make a quick change to a task, I rely very heavily on task management and I comment on pretty much everything internally with my team. It's become a really big tool for me personally. And then let's talk about document management. So as a law firm, you know, pretty much everything you do ends up on a document. It kind of has to. And you have your drafting of your documents, your forms, your letters, and this is going kind of circling back to what I talked to earlier about templates. You can have templates for setting up your matters. You can have templates for tasks. We'll talk about doing the same thing for documents. So it's the drafting of those documents. It's the storage of those documents. Are you storing them in a filing cabinet in your office? Are they in your desk and you're the only one to access? Is it locally on your computer and not being shared? Is it on a shared server? Is it anywhere that can be accessed by other people? That's something important to think about, especially if you're collaborative, but also for security reasons. And then sharing with the client. So there's secure storage, but also secure sharing. Are you sharing through email, let's say? Email is not secure unless you're using your own encryption tool, which requires a password. On that email, it is not secure. What type of information are you sharing that way right now? So a few things to keep in mind for documents: cloud access and offsite backup. I think probably the majority of you who didn't have this ran into a lot of issues in the past year. This is one of the main reasons many businesses were scrambling in around March, April 2020, because they couldn't come into the office, but they also couldn't access their information. So being able to access any data, but especially documents, that's only possible with cloud. You need to have it somewhere, located somewhere that's accessible by multiple people, no matter where they may be located. I know traditionally in the past, it's like, oh, nobody should access work information from home. It's not the case anymore. You need to be able to access it from wherever you may be. And not just for this remote hybrid work environment, same thing if you're on travel or if you're visiting a client's office, to be able to access that information there and not have to call and ask somebody to scan something and send it to you makes a big difference in your interactions with your client. Also, offsite backup, that's been a requirement forever. And I specifically say offsite because just because you're backing up, there are so many people who do not back up correctly, meaning they will have a document and back it up to their individual laptop. Well, what if that laptop crashes? Then what? Your backup and maybe even the original file is useless. That backup has to be off of whatever device or different location, like physical location, than where those items are stored. The point is to prepare for if something goes wrong. Something goes wrong, you lose that information. How do you retrieve it? For that reason, it has to be somewhere else. Mattercentric organization, also for documents. So you're seeing a theme here. Being able to get it could be receipts, it could be your invoices, it could be your agreements and your contracts. Everything should be filed specifically under that matter, just like you would have in a filing cabinet. Your electronic storage should be done just the same way. Automated assembly tools. This is back to what I mentioned earlier about tools like Hot Docs. That is a document assembly tool. Like I said, some practice management tools have that built in, some document management, but it really depends on if you're looking at a document storage tool, which is just to physically store your data, like Dropbox, for instance, is a storage tool. But there's also document management systems that are a lot more robust, may include drafting tools, may include ways to like email documents into your system, and can have a little bit more functionality, and you might be able to do some assembly with that as well. Big time saver to get those documents drafted more quickly and more accurately. Secure client portals. So when I mentioned email is not secure, that doesn't mean you have to give it to your client in person. There are a lot of options for either client portals, which are in practice management tools, or secure folders that you may have in your document storage application that are secure and encrypted. That's the key. If they're encrypted and your client has credential-based access, that is a secure location for you to share these documents. And it's immediate, just like email. You share it, they get a notification, they can access it, and they can share right back to you, but in a secure manner. And then communication. So I mentioned that communication is, your phone conversations, it's your email, it's virtual meetings. There's so many different ways in which we communicate both internally and externally, but it's very easy for all of that to kind of just dissipate into our day-to-day activity and not actually be recorded. So it's important to capture your communication through all channels, because as you know, if a client were to have a dispute, if they were to have a question, you really want to have that detailed information available and not be going just from memory. So a few tips here. Centralized matter communication. So I mentioned centralized records. This is about, email, for instance. You could have 5 people working on a matter. They may all be sending different emails to the client. Is everybody copied on every single email? Probably not. It's also not a reliable way to ensure that you're in the loop. So if there's a way to integrate, let's say, your email with a centralized tool so that everybody can see anything related to this file, regardless as to who sent it, that ensures that nothing is missed. Same thing with phone conversations. You can also integrate voice over IP systems with a lot of practice management type of tools so that you can keep an eye on when those calls happen, sometimes even save transcripts depending on the functionality that you have, or recordings. So we have email, I mentioned, voice over IP, and then virtual meetings. So virtual meetings, you can have recordings, sometimes even transcripts with those as well, depending on the tool that you're using. Capture it. That's helpful for both sides, you and the client. And internal chat and commenting functions. I already mentioned commenting. Chat is another one. Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Chat. There's a lot of tools that you can use to communicate more effectively with your team. That is, especially for these little things, instead of having to walk over to somebody's desk or call them on the phone and interrupt whatever they're doing, being able to just send them that quick message saves a lot of time. And just a few last pointers to mention, if you are looking for new technology, a few things to keep in mind for your daily functions. Mobile remote access, this used to be a plus, now it is absolutely a requirement. I'm referring to both accessing your data remotely and even having something like a mobile app or access on a tablet. Mattercentric records, everything we discussed today could be non-matter related, but 90% of the time it's going to be related to a file. So you need a way to assign that. Anywhere you can find automation, you're never going to automate the practice of law. There are certain things that will never be automated, but a lot of the administrative work, stuff that's very repetitive, anything that you do time and time again in a similar fashion can likely be automated. Value enhanced collaboration, especially with the hybrid work environment. You want to ensure that you can collaborate effectively online and not just rely on physically meeting in one location to discuss a certain topic. All right, that wraps up the session for today. For those who are not familiar with CosmoLex, we provide a cloud-based all-in-one legal practice management solution. It does include everything that we talked about today. So the calendaring, the task tracking, the documentation, communication, but also your legal billing, your accounting, and your business accounting, trust accounting, and your billing. So any questions on that, please feel free to reach out. Be happy to answer those for you.
That's all the time that we're going to have for today. I would like to thank our sponsor, CosmoLex, and all of you for attending our webinar today as part of the LTRC Industry Insights Series. If you are curious about future webinars, please check out the APA LTRC page or follow our Twitter at LTRC for updates. I would also like to thank Erica for presenting today. You can keep up with CosmoLex at CosmoLex Legal on Twitter or cosmolex.com. We will now conclude the webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.